Picture two ancient men standing face to face. One has a thick, full beard. The other has almost none. To you, it's just a difference in hair. To the people standing around them thousands of years ago, it might have been reading one of the most important signals a human face could send. Here's the thing nobody tells you about human hair. You have roughly the same number of hair follicles as a chimpanzee. Not similar. Roughly the same. Somewhere around 5 million follicles, spread across nearly identical skin. So why does a chimp look like it's wearing a fur coat and you don't, except for one very specific patch on your face? This isn't a small, trivial mystery. It's one of the strangest unresolved questions in human evolution, and for over a century, researchers genuinely couldn't agree on the answer. Let's talk about it. You can't explain the beard without explaining the disappearance first. Somewhere between 2 and 3 million years ago, our ancestors started losing body hair almost everywhere. Not thinning it out, losing it entirely, follicle by follicle, switching from thick, pigmented terminal hair to the nearly invisible, fine hair called vellus that covers most of your body right now. Every other primate on the planet kept its thick coat. Every single one, from chimpanzees to gorillas to orangutan. We are the one glaring exception among roughly 300 living primate species, and an exception that extreme, that's specific to one lineage, doesn't happen by accident. The leading explanation comes down to heat. Anthropologist Nina Jablonski, who has spent decades researching the evolution of human skin and hair, points to one core issue. Early humans were becoming persistence hunters, not ambush predators waiting in the grass for a single burst of speed. Endurance predators chasing prey for hours across open, brutally hot East African terrain until the animal simply collapsed from heat exhaustion, unable to keep pace with a hunter who could. Here's the wild part though. Running for hours under direct equatorial sun creates a serious problem of its own. Overheating kills faster than starvation ever could. A core body temperature just a few degrees above normal can cause organ failure within hours. And thick body hair, exactly the kind every other primate still carries, traps heat right against the skin at the precise moment your body needs to release it fastest. So evolution made a trade. It swapped fur for sweat glands. Humans carry somewhere between 2 and 4 million eccrine sweat glands, more per square inch of skin than almost any other mammal alive, and dense body hair physically blocks that sweat from evaporating efficiently off the skin's surface. Strip the fur away, and your built-in cooling system finally works the way it's supposed to. There's a second piece of Jablonski's research worth mentioning here too. Losing hair also exposed bare skin directly to sunlight for the first time, which is part of why researchers believe darker, more melanin-rich skin evolved around the same window, protecting against UV damage while still allowing enough sunlight through for vitamin D production. Hair loss and skin pigmentation, in other words, may have evolved as a linked package, both driven by the same underlying pressure. Surviving as an upright, actively hunting, heavily sweating animal under the African sun. That theory explains the disappearance cleanly. But here's where it gets interesting. It creates an even bigger problem for the beard. If losing hair was purely about survival, why did one patch of it stay behind, and stay behind specifically on men? The face isn't a random leftover. It's a deliberate one. Look at exactly where humans kept meaningful hair. The scalp shielding the skull from direct sun exposure during exactly the kind of long, exposed midday hunting Jablonski's research describes. Eyebrows and eyelashes, keeping sweat and debris out of the eyes during that same physical exertion. And on men specifically, starting at puberty and driven by hormonal change, the lower face and jaw. That last one breaks the cooling theory completely. A beard doesn't help you run faster or sweat more efficiently. If anything, it works against you, trapping heat exactly where major blood vessels sit close to the surface of the skin in a location that provides no shielding advantage the way scalp hair does. So if temperature regulation explains why we lost fur everywhere else, something else entirely has to explain why the beard survived. And the leading answer isn't about survival at all. It's about selection. Charles Darwin noticed this exact discrepancy back in 1871 in The Descent of Man. He couldn't explain why a trait offering no clear survival benefit would show up so consistently across human males and essentially never on women in the same way. His conclusion was that natural selection wasn't the mechanism driving it. Sexual selection was the same general category of pressure responsible for a peacock's tail. A trait that persisted not because it helped you survive, but because it helped you get chosen. Here's the thing nobody tells you about how modern research picked up where Darwin left off. Evolutionary researcher Barnaby Dixon has run multiple studies across different countries and cultures, showing people photographs of men with varying amounts of facial hair, ranging from clean-shaven to light stubble to a full, heavy beard. The same pattern shows up again and again across these studies. Heavier beards get consistently rated as more dominant, more mature, and more capable of defending resources or social standing, particularly in judgments made by other men, which researchers interpret as evidence the signal evolved partly for intramale competition, not just to attract partners. Some of Dixon's follow-up work found that women's preferences were more mixed and context-dependent, but the dominant signaling effect among men reading other men's faces showed up reliably almost everywhere it was tested. And here's the part that makes the whole thing click biologically. Facial hair growth is directly tied to testosterone and to a much higher density of androgen receptors in the skin of the jaw and chin specifically than almost anywhere else on the body, which means a full, thick beard isn't just decoration sitting on top of the skin. It's a visible readout of hormonal activity that's been happening underneath the whole time, correlated with the same hormone linked to muscle mass, aggression thresholds, and reproductive maturity. Ancient humans couldn't run a blood test on a stranger, but they could look at a man's face and get an instant rough read on him before a single word was spoken. In a small tribal group where sizing up allies and rivals quickly genuinely mattered for survival, that's a real measurable advantage. There's a second layer to this too. Some researchers argue the beard may have doubled as a kind of passive protection, a small physical buffer against blows to the jaw during the kind of physical conflict that was far more routine in ancient social hierarchies than it is today. A 2020 study out of the University of Utah tested this directly, striking bearded and unbearded simulated jaw structures with the same force, and found the fur-covered samples absorbed noticeably more energy before fracture. Not armor exactly, but enough of a cushion to matter when your only available weapons were your own hands. There's also a competing theory worth mentioning, honestly, because the science here isn't fully settled. Some researchers propose that visible facial hair patterns may have also functioned as a low-cost signal of health, since parasites and skin conditions show up more visibly against a full, well-groomed beard than against smooth skin, making a clean, thick beard a subtle advertisement of good condition. It's a smaller, less tested idea than the dominant signaling research, but it points in the same general direction. The beard as information, not insulation. So you end up with two completely separate evolutionary forces acting on the exact same patch of skin. One force stripped hair away almost everywhere else on the body because in that context, heat was the real enemy of survival. A second unrelated force kept hair in one very specific place because on that one part of the body, hair wasn't fighting biology, it was broadcasting it. That's not a coincidence. That's the real reason the question, why do men have beards, was never really a question about hair at all. It was always a question about information. For nearly the entire span of human history, long before spoken language could be trusted to reliably convey intent, your face was already telling a story to every single person who looked at you. A thick, healthy beard on an adult man was a walking, visible signal of maturity, hormonal health, and physical capability, readable at a glance, in a world where a glance sometimes had to be enough. Which brings us to right now. You probably shave that story off most mornings without thinking twice about it. A few strokes of a razor, and a signal that took millions of years of evolutionary pressure to develop is gone in under 2 minutes. A level of control over your own biological signaling that no human before roughly the last century of disposable blades ever had. Other men spend real time and effort growing it back out deliberately, shaping and styling something their ancestors never actually got to choose whether to have in the first place. Either way, you're not simply managing hair when you stand at a mirror in the morning. You're consciously editing a biological signal your body has been broadcasting since long before you could speak a single word. Your ancestors never got to choose. You do it every single morning without even realizing that's exactly what you're doing.